This episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. Speaking Podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREWtally and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Marko DeSantis of Sugarcult, who are celebrating 20 years of their first album, Start Static. Fuck, I can't believe it has been 20 years since that record came out. If you are around my age in your mid to late 30s, obviously Start Static had the very popular Bouncing Off the Walls, which a lot of you would have known from the Van Wilder movie. I believe it was actually like the lead-off single, as well as songs like The Way, and just a slew of other great material on that record and throughout the whole band's discography. I am currently live on Facebook recording this and struggling to open this beer. There we go. I have a Weathered Souls Peppermint Stout. This thing comes in at a hefty 12.8 APV, so interested to try this. I know it's a little bit not really in the peppermint season, but wow, it's actually really good. So a lot of times with mint anything in beer, a lot of times it's kind of rough. You know, they're going to go more candy flavored, more super sweet. And sometimes with the peppermint, it's more of like a peppermint candy. It's more of like just straight mint. And I know that's a very weird comment to make, that it's not necessarily a peppermint, but it's almost my same take with how a lot of breweries and a lot of beers, when you do a peanut butter or something, or a peanut butter cup, a lot of times if they do a peanut butter beer, it'll be more chocolate based with a hint of like salty kind of peanut butter flavor. And I find that a lot of mint, peppermint things are the same way, where it's like, are you going to get something that's like an actual mint? Are you going to get something that's more kind of in a wintergreen or spearmint? So it is kind of interesting to see how a lot of companies will go about doing this. That said, this is probably one of the better peppermint flavored beers I've ever had, especially for a stout. So the sweet really complements the back end of kind of the stout, the fuller bodied flavor, and gives it something that you're not typically used to seeing with the stout, which is something a little bit more sweeter in the flavor profile. So this is super good. Again, it's from Weathered Souls. It's just a straight peppermint stout. If you are in the area to get one, I'm sure it's long gone, but if you see one, pick it up. Definitely worth a try. The interesting thing about this conversation, though, kind of segueing back into it, when I started this podcast, I actually had really wanted to get someone from Sugarcult on the show because I love this album and this band so much, and it's really interesting to see how a lot of people identify Sugarcult as being a pop band or a pop punk band, but I think there's so much more than that. And it's one of those where I tend to find that when you really listen to the band's discography, you kind of really see that there's more to the band than just being the Bouncing Off the Walls band or Memory or any of the other singles that a lot of people know them from. I think that actually kind of encapsulates sort of the melting pot of ages living out in Los Angeles and just all the different styles and genres that they are, but really kind of being a byproduct of the alternative scene of the mid to late 90s. And it's one of those where I think if you haven't listened to Start Static in a while or really the rest of their catalog, I strongly encourage you to. It's a really impressive 3-album, retrospective, I guess, at this point, but just a lot of great music on there, great playing that's on it. And it was really cool getting to talk to Marko. He is one of those, other than on his Instagram, he doesn't really have socials, and neither do really any of the band. So it's been kind of hard to keep up with what the band's been doing since basically the band has gone on a hiatus. I mean, I know Tim, their singer / guitar player, started up a production career, has done really well with that, and does such interesting bands like, that big Walk Off the Moon, I think, or Walk Off the Earth, that Shut Up and Dance With Me song. That Tim produced that. Like, he helped, write that song with that band. And I remember actually that band getting to open for Sugarcult, like had won some kind of a contest like a decade plus ago. And I think they opened for him here in Michigan, in Kalamazoo. I think, if I'm not mistaken on the story of that, but it's just one of those that I have always loved this band, and I've always wanted to talk to someone. And like a lot of the early bucket list guests I had for the show, it wasn't necessarily like they're super prolific or they're super well known and everyone knows who they are, but it's one of those that they're important to me and the impact they've had on me as a musician and as a music fan. And that I think because there's not a whole lot necessarily out there about them, or stories being told from this era, that's what makes them more interesting, because they're stories that we don't know. And speaking of stories you don't know, I'm going to stop talking. Let's get into my conversation with Marko, and we will see you on the other side of it. With Zoom and the pandemic and basically everyone wanting to do the digital hangouts and so forth, I was like, what was wrong with Skype? Like, Skype works and still works just fine. I don't know why we needed to come up with 3 or 4 different mediums again to do the same thing that's been doing for forever.
Right, that's true. Skype was kind of there first. Skype was kind of, and I feel like now Skype is going to end up being like the Friendster of the, like, remember, like there was Friendster, then that didn't really work, and there was like
Zanga and shit like that.
Yeah, it'll get pushed into the corner of history that where like Friendster and Zune and Rhapsody, like Rhapsody was streaming way before Spotify started. Zune was around way before the iPod, and then Friendster was around way before MySpace and Facebook and everything. So it's funny. It's just, timing.
Well, I think it's still weird that like Bandcamp still exists and people treat it like it's a new thing. And it's like Bandcamp's been around for a very long time. But totally. I think they're one of the few, though, that figured out an interesting way to pay artists with the whole Bandcamp Friday thing.
Yeah.
And I think that was the one thing I'll give them, that they were able to figure out to stay relevant and stay successful. Absolutely. And keep everyone afloat. And it's kind of interesting. Like, I know... I don't know your age per se, but like I just turned 37 yesterday. So it's like I have the recollection of the internet before it existed and then kind of the infancy of it. And so it's kind of interesting to just kind of see and remember all the things that we were so all about, chat rooms and stuff like that. And being connected to people.
As time marches on, you start to become a little bit like, you become aware of that stuff. I think most of us that are like music fanatics, we have that in common, that we think we're music fans, but what we probably really are culture, like culture and analysts. You know what I mean? On the surface, it's like, hey, you're a music fan, but usually you scratch the surface of a music fan, you find someone who's actually a history buff. and then maybe an armchair sociologist. I think we think we're just digging our bands, but because you can get so granular, you can get into different scenes and different movements and different eras and different. What you really realize as you become more of a grown-up is like, oh shit, I think that I'm just using music as the prism to view the world, but really what I am is a historian and a sociologist and a social psychologist and maybe like a cultural analyst and maybe even a meteorologist of some sort, where you sort of study the weather patterns of culture. And that's really what it is. And you nailed it. Like when you said about Bandcamp, I think Bandcamp's, I mean, aside from the fact that they have the most ridiculous name, they've done they've done a really formidable job of pivoting and, not necessarily running to keep up with the times, but somehow adapting and acclimating to the times and then finding a way to still matter. You know what I mean? Whereas so many other companies and bands, let's be honest, are just like, they're just constantly out of breath because they're just running to try to catch the train, And it's like, I always say to like young bands I work with, I'm like, don't try to like, waste all your breath trying to catch the train that's already left the station. Be the train, build the next train, And anyways, we could get into all that nerdy kind of talk, but
well, I mean,
I'm on my second cup of coffee. So,
well, I was gonna say I have like, where's my camera? I have my cider because it's fall season now, and then I got my water, so I'm ready to talk. And thank you also, Michigan, Grand Rapids.
Oh, okay. Well, it's still pretty fucking early in the morning to be like hoisting a cider. Yeah. So,
well, it's not an alcoholic cider; it's just literally cider.
Oh, okay. You're having like apple cider. Okay,
yeah, gotcha. Great apple cider.
You're like, I thought you were powering a beer. I'm like, hey man, what's the old saying? If you haven't had 1 by 11, you gotta have 11 by 1, right?
Yeah, there you go. Oh. Well, or it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, there you go. 5 o'clock somewhere.
But I was gonna say, like, actually a couple of points actually to something you were just saying, that we as music fans kind of very much. The phrase that I latched onto that you were saying was almost like the snapshot. And I'm almost like, but I think that's the interesting thing is because music is basically for the artist, a snapshot of your lives when you created that record. And maybe a year or two before the music actually comes out that influenced the ideas and the concepts that ended up being on these records. So it's one of those where I feel like maybe that's why it always feels like we're kind of a historian to a degree, because we're talking about independent snapshots across so many different perspectives and landscapes of people's backgrounds and so forth. And I think that's a really interesting concept and idea that I've never heard articulated that way. But as you're saying, I was like, holy shit, you're totally right. Like, I mean, in a completely nonsensical way, like, I mean, I have vinyl sitting right off to the side of me, which is coming back because it's some people like myself, like the tactile, like I open it up, here's the artwork, the liner notes and all that kind of stuff. Cause CDs aren't really getting printed anymore because it's just not cost efficient to do that. But then I think about my dad literally still had, it's funny you said a Zoom player. He still has the, what were those things called? The mini disc. He still has a mini disc player.
Oh, right.
And I'm like, what are you going to do with that? It's not like you can find any of these anymore. Like, just let this thing go, dude.
I know. It's so funny. And he probably still feels like it's pretty modern. Like, hey, man, I got this newfangled thing.
Well, it's not.
Like, hey, man.
Yeah, he doesn't think it's new. But it is funny that it's like, I think the other part of that I thought was more funny is that I feel like indirectly we are hoarders of things because
dude, if I turn my camera around like you're sitting in a studio, it's just like I look at my, at our house we have this like detached part of the house, that's kind of become my I guess what you call a man cave, once you have like a family, which is essentially just my excuse to have all of my rock and roll jive in a place where like kids can't get into it.
Right.
I've got just guitars and records and pop culture stuff. And just, it's just a weird obsession, man. It's like, I keep waiting to grow out of it, but I don't think it's going to happen. I have more years, but knock on wood, I probably have as many years in front of me as I have behind me as if all goes as planned. And I've been obsessed with rock and roll, and I mean all kinds of music. I love all styles of music, but I've just been obsessed with the culture of music from probably when I was like 6 years old. And then, probably what led me to even get in a band was just because I was such a big fan of music. And I'm sure this is a cliche at this point. I'm sure lots of people have this story where you like something so much, you want to you don't just want to hold it in your hand. You want to climb inside of it and see how it works on the inside out. And then you get, you learn, you want to learn how to do it yourself. And a front row seat is not close enough. You want to be on the stage, and, but I've somehow never, I've played music with so many different people. A lot of people I play music with aren't necessarily big fans of music. They just love making up songs and they love playing music, but they don't go see other bands play or collect records. And I never stopped being a fan. And I don't know if that's something that Sugarcult fans could connect with. Probably subconsciously, I think Sugarcult fans could tell that even though I was up on stage playing guitar, I was one of them. I was in the audience fucking rocking out and doing stage dives like they were, but I was just on stage with a guitar strapped on me. It was so I feel like we connected on that energy. I probably related to the fans in the audience more than I even related to our drummer. You know what I mean? It was because I'm dude, I was that fucking kid that would have my mom drop me off at a show. If the show started at 8 p.m., I'd get there at 3 p.m. and just be the lurking fucking 13-year-old at sound check, just waiting outside to try to get in. Or if I was lucky, I'd get in and watch a sound check. And that to me was just as interesting as watching the actual show, because it was hey, there's the guy from the band, but he's just chilling out in a t-shirt now, and he's not wearing his whole getup. And they're making jokes on stage. What are they even talking about? What does that mean? And then you're just keying in on all the details of what kind of pedal are they using? How do they wrap their cable around their guitar strap? What kind of guitar is that? Why is that guy using that? Why are the cymbals set up flat on the drum kit instead of this? Just noticing all the details and just geeking out on them. And then you just pouring that all in your head. And then later on one day you start a band and then you apply that stuff, I suppose, subconsciously. But yeah.
Well, it's funny because even when I get to go, a lot of times I'll do the in-person interviews during the sound checks or whatever for some of the other bands and so forth. So a lot of times I'll get to hear a band working on something and I'm oh my God, I can't believe they're pulling that out tonight. Haven't heard that song in 10 years or whatever. And then they don't play it. And I'm and I'll maybe if I know the person that was interviewing or whatever, I might text them or whatever and be you guys are I thought they were going to play that song. Nah. They weren't feeling it.
A lot of times at soundcheck, that's where we would use soundcheck was an opportunity to kind of try out some new ideas. If we were writing a new song or had some new idea for a song, or if we wanted to just sort of play some song just for fun, play some old song to see if we still remembered how it went. But sometimes we'd get inspired and be oh shit, we should play that tonight. But
I think one of the crazier ones I saw was actually the band in Berlin were playing in Lansing, and they sound checked and did Refused New Noise. And I was what the fuck? Because didn't expect that from them. And Christian actually and the rest of the band sounded really good doing it. And I was if they do that tonight, people are going to lose their shit. And they did not, of course.
God,
but it was.
I love that band Refused so much.
Yeah.
It's funny. I just showed this the other day. I was doing an interview with somebody and they wanted me to show some old memorabilia. And I have the crappy guitar that I used in the Stuck in America video.
Mm-hmm.
It looks cooler than it actually is. It's actually kind of a piece of junk, but on the back of it, no one ever really saw the back unless you were, saw me play live the few times. But the nerdy story about this, we loved Refused. If you can tell if you watch our video for Memory, we're basically ripping off New Noise.
Yeah.
I showed that to the director. I was I want us to kind of go for that vibe. We're not gonna have Tim hanging upside down screaming, but aesthetically, we always really connected to their singer Dennis. We toured together on the 2004 Warped Tour, and I think our bands kind of had we had sort of a weird little artistic crush on each other, where I would see International Noise Conspiracy, Dennis from Refused, other band, watching us, and then he would see me always watching them, and then but But I figured for some reason, you know, you construct these narratives in your head. I'm like, oh God, these guys are from Sweden and they come from hardcore. They probably hate our stupid, you know, power pop band. And you know, they were probably thinking the same thing. They were probably like, oh God, these guys are on the radio. They probably hate our, like, you know, communist hardcore ideas. And then one day, just like what happens is one day I just like was like, well, fuck it. Hey man, what's going on? I'm Marko, Sugarcult. He's like, oh, I'm Dennis. Well, he has an accent, obviously. And we realized we had like so much in common. Like we grew up going through the same motions with music. We both like had this like unhealthy obsession with like obscure 70s power pop. And I mean, he literally had this like piece of paper folded in his back pocket that he like unfolded and would show me. It was like a list of like, you know, rare records he was looking for. So he would bring it with him everywhere. So while they were on tour, he'd go find record stores and like try to complete his little mission of finding these records. Cause I imagine for him, when you're from Europe and you're touring in America, it's like a fucking, just like, you know, it's like a giant thrift store. The whole country is just like finding cool shit to bring home, you know. But anyways, and you know, I suppose we do the same thing when we go over to Europe. It's just like, you know, I was always the guy who would like, you know, maybe go to, if we're in Scotland, I'm going to go to a whiskey store and sit there punishing the guy that works there for like an hour and have him teach me all about the cool little like distilleries and which ones they don't export. And, you know, you're kind of buying that. Or if you're in, maybe if you're in Italy, you're going to find some great like olive oil. Or if you're in, I would always bring back like products, like either, you know, food or alcohol or spices.
Local culture, literally.
I called them functional souvenirs. You know, I'd also bring back a bunch of useless crap too. You know, like, you know, I remember I was in Russia and I went to a flea market. Did we lose? Are you still there?
I can still hear you. You're just froze on my side.
You froze.
Actually, well, on my side, you froze. If you can still hear me. Oh, there we go.
Let's see, John. Did you freeze? Did we lose each other?
I lost you. You froze, but I could hear you the whole time. Still there? Check my internet. Internet's fine. This is fun.
Is that me or is that you?
On mine, it looks like you. We'll figure this out in a second. This is fun. Technical difficulties, just as we're getting into some fun convos. I will take a sip of my cider. All right, so we'll wait for Marko to come back. So if you're watching the video, I probably won't cut this out because it'll be funny. Actually, I know I can do that because I've done it with the podcast. So.
Hey, man. Sorry about that.
No worries. I was just saying, like, I could hear you the whole time. You ended up freezing, but I could hear you the whole time.
Oh,
So I
that's
don't.
so weird.
So I have
Well,
no idea.
Oh, man. Well, anyway, I didn't know if it was on my end or your end, but just to be safe, I just restarted. So anyways, sorry about that. So we were just geeking out about, we were talking about how, our band and International Noise Conspiracy sort of had a crush on each other on the Warped Tour, and such a great band. It's a trip. They just celebrated the 20-year anniversary of one of their records. This year we're celebrating the 20-year anniversary of our first record, Start Static. It's just a trip, man. It's like 20 years goes by pretty fast. To your point earlier, how music is this moment in time that gets documented that maybe represents the year or two prior to leading up to a record. I would almost liken it in a way. It's kind of like, I think I'm inspired because of the decoration of your podcast here with all the wine bottles and whiskey. It's similar to maybe whiskey or wine in that it does have, even though it is something that is grown fresh and recorded, in the case of spirits, it would be bottled.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I feel like certain music is like, boom, it's got the born on date. You better have it fresh, but certain music I feel really does need to ferment culturally. It needs to ferment. It needs to gain in depth and complexity over time. It needs time. It needs lightness or darkness, something to kind of happen to it chemically after you've written the songs and recorded them and released them, And so I feel like certain records, and I guess similar to, since I'm running on this analogy, certain bottles of wine might have that too, where there's that certain, like, okay, you can drink it after it's done and probably enjoy it, or you can stick it under your bed for 10 years and then pull it out, and it becomes this interesting kind of, well, that's why they call it spirits. It kind of awakens this like moment that is already past, but you get to access it. And in that case, maybe drink it and experience it, but yet it's somehow gained in complexity. Well, what could also happen, I don't know how the chemistry of all this stuff works, but what can also happen is you can open it up. The risk you take is you're going to open it up in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and it might taste like vinegar.
Right.
Okay. Vinegar, the word, the etymology of the word vinegar is literally like, sour, like bad wine, like basically spoiled wine, I think gar means like something bad, and then vina is
vino,
wine.
or yeah.
So that's the origin of vinegar. It's like someone was like, well, fuck, this wine's no good, but we can use it for something else. And but that's a similar thing with certain records, I feel like, and I hope. I mean, I'm not going to be. I don't want to be arrogant and say this about our own record, but I feel personally, I hope people have that experience with Start Static, like the experience of like, oh man, I put this away 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or maybe they haven't listened to it in a while, and then they're going to open it up and go, maybe have it on vinyl and put it on and be like, kind of nervous, like, oh shit, is this going to taste like vinegar? Is this going to sound like vinegar? And I feel like, me personally, I had to listen to it a bunch of times because we've been doing all this stuff, planning the 20-year anniversary. And I was like, kind of holding my breath, like, oh shit, is it going to be good? And I was like, holy shit, this record's better than I remember it. Like, I feel like it aged really well.
I agree. Actually, hold on just a second. For the sake of...
Hey, look at you.
So I don't know. I'm trying to remember, actually, but like I have a numbered one.
Oh, yeah. That was from like 2013. We put out like a limited vinyl run. The new one, though, the new 20-year anniversary edition is a totally different animal, because the 20-year edition, I don't have a copy of it myself yet. It's got well, first of all, the cover is going to have the artwork on the cover is going to be like raised. It's going to be kind of embossed. And I think it's
like the plug, the guitar plug will be kind of,
the guitar plug's going to kind of be raised. And I think it's also going to be glossy on matte. And then it's going to, if you ever saw like the CD and you opened it up all the way, there's like the frayed end of the guitar cable.
Yeah.
And actually, if you have the European CD that came out on Epitaph Records, we flipped it and had the frayed end on the cover, right? So so we wanted to differentiate it from the American release. Anyway, so that cable ends with a frayed end. So if you get the new vinyl, you flip it around and it's got that frayed end on the back rather than the picture of us. And then you open up, it's gatefold. You open it up, there's a whole different picture of us. And then you take the slip out and there's that picture from the back of the album. And then on the back, there's a collage of all this other cool stuff, similar to the lyrics that we have on our CD. But we always switch out the pictures a little bit. So you're always getting every version of Start Static you get, whether you get the American CD, the European CD, the Japanese CD, or the American original vinyl pressing, or the American vinyl pressing that we just did for the 20-year anniversary. You're always going to get a slight different variation, which again goes back to the fact that I'm just a
collector
music nerd fan, and I love those types of details where you're like, oh shit, I gotta get every edition, I'm looking at my Jawbreaker Dear You on vinyl with the blue marble that they only did as a promotional thing, and then I have it on cassette, and then I have 2 different versions of it on CD. And it's just like, it's just fun, it's just fun to have that stuff. And yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, like, the thing that's kind of interesting to me, and you sort of hit on it, talking about, does the record hold up? So, like, I mean, my wife and I still collectively listen to Sugarcult as a whole, not just the one record, like the 3 records you've put out. And I tend to actually feel like you are actually a little bit ahead maybe of what you were doing. Like, and even listening to Start Static more just kind of as a whole and kind of thinking about it and, where I was, because I really didn't, I knew the songs off of this record because I mean it's hard not to hear Bouncing Off the Walls or The Way or Stuck in America. Like those were everywhere, especially like with much music making its way here into the States or whatever it ended up becoming. But it's like Fuse, that's it. And it's one of those where it's like it was hard not to know who you guys were, but it really wasn't until Memory that I was like, oh, this band is something a little bit more. I hate to say like not pop punk because that's kind of, it felt like that's the genre that everyone kind of put you in, was this sort of not alternative, but like a pop punky kind of band, like, with like a, I could see you playing, and you did obviously with like Green Day and stuff like that, but like, or a lot of those like early Epitaph or, Drive Through Records and so forth and like that, and the Warped Tour bands. But as I kind of was listening to more of the stuff, I was like, I feel like you really have more tendencies of like 90s alt to me. Mm-hmm. Especially listening into the record as a whole and the whole discography. I look at a song like The Way, like, I'm kind of sitting there going like the notes you're using in the intro, like and I still can't figure out if it's a flanger, if it's like a pitch pedal, or what is it?
I can tell you exactly. I wonder if I even have that pedal lying around. It's the craziest thing because it sounds, it's so funny with Sugarcult. It's like, it sounds like we know, like we know what we're doing, but we're really just like these like hacks that are in a room going like, hey, does that sound good? Or is that lame? Is that, like half the time we're just experimenting. And basically that is like, you just do the false harmonics, you go like,
yeah.
So it's just really easy. The false harmonic on the G string on the 5th fret, and then on the B string on the 7th fret, and then the G string on the 7th fret. So you go, and then.
Gotcha.
So it's super easy, but what you do is you take an MXR, the orange MXR Phase 90 pedal,
okay,
and you turn it up like just completely like, just primal. You don't even think about like fine tuning it. You just literally take it and then turn it up all the way as far as it goes, and you stomp on that, and then you play that, and then it ends up sounding all crazy, and that's the beginning of Pretty Girl.
Well, it's funny because like around that time you're starting to see, because this came out in like 2001, so Korn obviously is around. They're kind of playing around with a lot of flanges, pitch shifters, whammy pedals, doing like crazy dives, octave pedals and so forth. And to hear something like that in this style of music wasn't really happening. And like not traditionally, like you weren't seeing many bands coming out at the time of this record coming out really doing it that weren't in like the new metal scene really.
Huh, interesting. Maybe Sugarcult has unforeseen new metal tendencies. But honestly, it's interesting, John, that you point that out, because I do think, like I said before, this tiresome wine analogy that I'm using, I feel
squeezing
like
every grape ring you can get out of it.
Day, people cracked it open and they were just looking for the teenage, like, the teenage fucking buzz where you're just like, dude, crack this. I'm not drinking this wine to appreciate the nuance. I'm drinking this wine so I can get out of my head and I can get drunk. And then as you get older, it starts to be like, hey, I enjoy the feeling of having a glass of wine, but I really do enjoy the taste. Whereas when you're a kid, you're like, this is fucking gross, but it's worth it because I want to fucking hang out with my friends and, do something edgy, but as you get older, you start to appreciate like things like, the nuances of like craft beer or good whiskey or good wine. And it becomes kind of not like I remember being young and you're like, dude, you could get a fucking 12-pack of Natural Light for $2. It's like, I would rather have one beer for $10 that's great than have like all you can drink for free, of like some crap beer at this stage of my life. And I know to a younger person, that's like, they're like, what on earth are you fucking talking about? That's insane. Why would anybody want to do that? And, I think that's what happens with it. Just becomes about quality over quantity. And with our music, maybe what you're getting at is that, and I suspected this all along, that people kind of assumed that we were a pop punk band because there happened to be this giant wave of pop punk that was happening with like, at the same time Start Static came out, you had like Good Charlotte coming of age, you had Sum 41 emerging, you had Newfound Glory really hitting it, you had Blink-182 having like a sort of resurgent kind of culture, like they were sort of supplanting Green Day as like the cultural leaders of like commercial punk music. And like, you had this feeling in the air in the early 2000s of just newness where people just wanted things to be new. Even though Blink had been around since the early 90s, it just felt new again. Like their new approach was they were as big as they could get. Like you were saying, things like Fuse and MTV were playing this kind of scene. There was we were on the Warped Tour in 2001. So we kind of got like, we kind of somehow just climbed aboard this like movement that was happening. And for some reason, they were willing to accept us because of our songs like Stuck in America and Bouncing Off the Walls. That sort of could kind of pass as pop punk, and I think that a lot of people at the time just kind of blurred their eyes and went, yeah, pop punk, it's all good. Woo, right on, Sugarcult, But I think as time marches on, and in retrospect, one of the things we can geek out on now that it's been 20 years since that record came out is like you're saying, where you're like, well, wait a minute, how does that explain Pretty Girl the Way? How does that explain I Changed My Name? How does that explain Hate Every Beautiful Day? How do we,
Daddy's Little Defect, yeah.
We Come Crashing Down? Like there are more songs on that record that would never be considered pop punk if you just heard them on their own. If you hear them in context of the record, it makes sense. But like, I think that's the weirdest thing. And I don't really care about any of this kind of stuff because people call Sugarcult pop punk. They call us emo. They invite us to the emo party. They invite us to the pop punk party. And we've had lots of wonderful experiences touring with a lot of those bands. But I feel like the one thing that if you go back and listen to Palm Trees and Power Lines, Lights Out, Start Static, all of our records, you're going to realize that we were never the band that people thought we were.
No,
we were something more. And I'm not saying we were better than people thought we were, but I feel like we were maybe a little bit prematurely categorized, and it didn't hurt us because we were able to benefit from it. But I always the only band in the scene that I really identified with maybe was Jimmy World. And actually, I love Head Automatica, the shirt that you're wearing right there. I used to have that shirt. Daryl and I would talk a lot about like how we both loved like early Elvis Costello records. And, it was just that there was never, I guess, to just like make this more concise. When we started Sugarcult back in 1999, we never sat down and had a conversation and said, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to form a pop punk band. No one in our band owned a Blink-182 record. No one in our band had ever listened to Good Charlotte or even knew Newfound Glory existed. At the time we formed our band, the things that Tim, our singer, grew up on. He was like a super fan of Green Day, which I would consider pop punk. In my generation's definition of pop punk is different than people younger than me. My generation, what we used to call pop punk, was Green Day, Mr. T Experience, Screeching Weasel, you know, even maybe the Descendants. You know, it was like anything that was derived from the Descendants or the Ramones that was a little more melodic and happy.
Yeah,
we considered pop punk. You know, or maybe even derived from the Replacements. And so it was a weird thing when pop punk became this kind of catchphrase. It's almost like R&B. If you say R&B to somebody today, they're going to think you mean Drake. And to somebody else, they're going to be like, R&B, you mean Otis Redding? You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, or TLC. It's like, depending on what generation you say it, you know, I could talk to someone older than me and they're going to be like, oh, pop punk. Yeah. You mean the Angry Samoans? You know what I mean? You know, or they're going to say, oh, you mean the Dead Milkmen? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. So every generation has their own version. If you say it today, someone's going to think you mean MGK, you know? And like, so that's the beauty of rock and roll. It constantly belongs to whoever's currently 15 years old, and everyone else is free to hang out and sing along. But we have to also make space for new generations to create their own version of, you know, of rock and roll, and not have that. The one thing you and I, those of us who've been around for a minute, we have to keep ourselves in check, because you want to make sure you never become that person with like that smug person with your arms crossed, you know, saying like, oh, kids today don't know what fucking real punk rock is, because you don't know what real punk rock is either, and neither do I, because, you know, you know, it's all relative, right? Like, even people who say, oh, fucking people who make music on Ableton, they're not real musicians. You know, EDM's not real music. Hip hop's not real music. Well, they used to say the same shit about anyone who played an electric guitar back in the 1940s and 50s. You know, electric guitar was like, that's not a real guitar. You plug that thing in and it fucking has pickups on it. You know, like, so every generation is going to say that shit about somebody. So you got to just be cool and just embrace it. And I look at it like it's all good. Like, I've always been obsessed with digging through record stores and finding old music that that came out before my time, digging the stuff that's out currently in my generation, and then being hungry to see what's around the corner and what's next. And it doesn't have to be this, like, you know, you don't have to check one box. You can check it all out, and, you know.
Well, I think, like, so kind of to that point, a few things, you know, so like one time when I was, I had Dennis DeYoung, formerly of Styx, on here, and he was kind of at one point going on this tangent about, you know, the goddamn kids these days kind of thing. Like, you know, your generation doesn't appreciate music, or doesn't appreciate, you know, tactile music, and it's disposable and da-da-da-da-da. And I go, well, no, if anything, it's actually going back to what it was when you were a kid and you were all buying music, when you were buying, you know, the Sun records, you know, with the Elvises, the Jerry Lee Lewises, and all that. Singles. And the music industry was just, here's a single and then a B-side, and then that band's going to go tour on that for a year and a half. The next single goes, and it just ad nauseum, like rinse, wash, repeat. And I go, the music industry has gone back to what it was when you started, when it became an industry that you could literally buy physical product for, because there were at-home CD players and so forth. I go, so don't necessarily blame my generation. Like, I have thousands of dollars worth of, you know, CDs. I have, you know, skateboards and stuff of music and posters and all this stuff. Like, I'm not the person that's like, oh, fuck the music industry and fuck, you know, buying tactile things. Like, I still appreciate all that. It's that the industry realized, like, people seemingly, because we have everything at our phones right here, no one's going to go buy that. Like, if someone's listening to something, Shazam it. What is that? Okay, cool. Now I can put that on my Spotify playlist or whatever.
It's convenient. It's convenient. And it's wonderful. And again, like I said, it's not this binary thing where it's like either you're listening to it on your phone or you're like putting it on your gramophone, your vintage like gramophone from the you know, 100 years ago. It's like, no. If you look at a graph right now, as streaming becomes bigger and bigger and more people are getting crazy about music and making playlists, what's happening is vinyl is also it's following the same trajectory. Sales of vinyl are going up and up and up. I mean, we put out our 20-year anniversary vinyl. The clear vinyl edition's already sold out like the first day. We're like, oh shit, we should have made more, you know? But like,
now do you have your cassettes? Do you have cassettes coming?
Why are people buying something that they already have had for 20 years on CD, B, they have on Spotify or Apple Music ostensibly, and C, now you have to take it out of a sleeve, put it delicate, you know, it's this delicate thing that can be scratched, and you have to put it on this thing and like carefully do the thing and listen to it for a little while and then turn around and go get up again and flip it over. Like, you're paying for the inconvenience, but I don't think that's what it is. I just think it's human nature. We come from hunter-gatherer roots. We want to go out and find the stuff that matters to us. And if anything, it puts the impetus on guys like the dude from Styx that you're talking about to make dope shit, because it's like the days are gone where you can't pass off like filler on people just because that the only way they're going to get that song is if they buy the whole CD. Now they just, it used to bum me out when you buy a CD and there was like 2 good songs on it. It's like, now this is where, you know, the bands that really made the records that have like, you know, beginning, middle, and end, and really took the time and care to make a great record and not just like look at a record like a, you know, basically a fucking, you know, insulated container for 2 or 3 good songs.
Right.
Well, and you know, not to sound, you know, not to sound like unseemly, but like, I do feel like we are being kind of like culturally compensated now, all these years later, for the fact that we made our 3 records. Yeah, we only made Sugarcult, only made three full-length records, but we're being culturally sort of appreciated because people are kind of going, you know, I appreciate that your records can be listened to from beginning to end, and they're not just like these, you know, it's not just like 2 songs that we like and then 10 songs that are sort of like shittier versions of the 2 songs we like, which, you know, we took a lot of care, and when we made each one of our records to I think it's because we grew up listening to full-length records. You know, we grew up as huge fans of records like Nirvana, Nevermind, and you know, one of the bands we always talk about is this band that we loved when at the time we started Sugarcult, called Superdrag. Loved this band, Superdrag. Even that record, Jimmy Eat World Bleed American, is a great record. You know, obviously, you know, so many of those records in the 90s, they're just so fucking good. You know, Weezer's Blue record, Oasis, you know, definitely Maybe, Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese Dream. It's like, yeah, Sugarcult is the product of 90s music with also diving into used record stores and finding awesome, cool vibes, you know, kids listening to 90s music, but then going, okay, now we're listening to Nirvana and Smashing Pumpkins and Weezer, but they're talking about cool shit that they liked from the late 70s and early 80s. We're going to go back and discover that stuff. And we stole so many ideas from, I mean, just look at us. We stole so many ideas from The Clash and The Cars and Blondie and, you know, like I said, Elvis Costello and Cheap Trick. And, you know, because to us, it was like, this is just fucking like, it's like finding cool shit in a thrift store where you're like, oh my God, I can just wear the same shit as all my friends and shop at like Walmart or Target or like Hot Topic. Or I can go to a thrift store and I'm going to find really cool shit that maybe was mass produced at one point, but time has forgotten about. And I can learn about that, repurpose it, and then present it to a new generation. And it's going to be new and exciting all over again. So that was kind of our thing. We're like, we were never the kind of band that just wanted to keep up with the Joneses and be like, hey, everyone's doing ska punk now. Okay, everyone's doing pop punk now. Everyone's doing emo now. Everyone's doing screamo now. Everyone's doing dance punk now. Everyone's doing electroclash now. Everyone's doing indie rock now. Everyone's doing folk indie rock now. Fuck that. It's like all that stuff's cool, but we would never want to be the band that like jumps on the bandwagon. We kind of with Sugarcult, it was almost like it was as simple as this. How do we form our own favorite band? What is it that we wish? It's like, be the change you want to see. What is it we wish? Like, Nirvana was cool, but I wish they were sexier. Green Day was cool, but I wish they had more. It would be cool if they were more like this. Superdrag's cool, but I wish they were less like this. This band's cool, but I wish they were more like that. And we were just like, sort of take the ingredients we liked from the bands we appreciated, and then we're like, let's put together our own. Let's be our own favorite band.
Right.
Start Static is literally the record we wished existed, and then we went to work making that record. And now I look back at it 20 years later, and it's cool because you have objectivity. At the time, you don't really know. You hope. You're like, fuck, people are buying this record. That's cool. They're playing it on the radio. That's awesome. I guess people dig it. But it's not until 20 years goes by that you can have objectivity and look back on it and go, oh, fuck, that record's cool. It doesn't even matter. I don't even think that's me playing on it. I just listen to it like it's just a record I bought by any other band, you know? Kind
of speaking to a few things of that, and my timeline might be a little bit incorrect. This record, Start Static, came out in March of 2021. Or I'm sorry, not 2021. Jesus Christ.
Of
2001. Yeah, 2021.
2001. 3 weeks. It's easy to remember because it was 3 weeks to the day of 9/11.
Okay, so that's my point, actually. So with a song like Stuck in America, and, I just actually, I think it was Loudwire or someone like that, posted this list of all the songs that were banned from radio after 9/11. And some of the songs are just like, what is, okay, like, I think it was like, couldn't play anything by like Jefferson Airplane because it had airplane in the name, or things like that. And you're just like, what? Why does that matter? Yeah, it was just different times. But I'm wondering, did you guys catch any shit for Stuck in America? Especially, the line of everyone's talking about blowing up the neighborhood.
Oh, 100%, dude. That song that song got axed right away. It was one of the first ones. It wasn't as bad as like Drowning Pool when the bodies hit the floor.
Well, I remember like Bleed American had to change its name to just the self-title.
Jimmy Eat World Bleed American had to go self-titled. And immediately, we were like, we were enjoying this. You have to put it in context. We were like kind of a new band from Santa Barbara, California. And we got 2 years into being a band. We got a record deal, got to go in the studio in April of 2001 and make this record. And then June of 2001, we got on the Warped Tour. So we had this record. We just finished making Start Static, and now we're on the Warped Tour while they're like pressing up Start Static and getting ready to like release it. We knew it was coming out at the end of the summer. We got like the holy grail tour opportunity because it was like, guess what, guys? We're, June 20th, you're starting the Warped Tour. August 21st, the record comes out. So we go on the Warped Tour 2001, and then they somewhere along the way they released the song Stuck in America to the radio, and it started getting played everywhere. We're like, holy shit, this is so awesome. Then the record came out. People had seen us on the Warped Tour. People had heard our song on the radio. People started buying the record. Everything was just going great. And then 9/11 happened, and they took our song off the radio, and all of our tour dates got canceled. It was crazy. But, obviously, those are champagne problems compared to what 9/11, right. The repercussions of 9/11 were a lot more profound than woe is me. I don't get to be a rock and roll star for 5 minutes. But it was gnarly for us because, it was our first time. It was like everything was new. First record, first song on the radio, first time touring. It was just like everything was brand new. And then that happened, and it was like, oh shit. And to me, that really was like this. It's weird, dude. It's like our record came out in 2001. 2001, not only was there 9/11, of course, but there was also, on a lighter note, there was the introduction of the iPod. There was, Wilco, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, where they got dropped from their label, and then they took the record and put it out themselves for free on the internet. And then by the end of the year, it became album of the year on a lot of critics lists. It was like one of the first records where people were like, the band takes it, puts it out themselves. Radiohead did their whole thing with like Pay What You Want. Mm-hmm. The White Stripes got a hit on the radio that year. The White Stripes had been this underground band. I had seen them before. this underground little garage punk band from Detroit. You never thought in a million years that a garage punk band would ever get, like, the biggest you could get if you played garage punk was like John Spencer Blues Explosion. Like, you were never going to become mainstream stars. The fucking Strokes record came out, like, I think the same month as Start Static. And we loved the Strokes. Like, we had their Rough Trade 7-inch from before, you know, maybe a year or two earlier. And we like, you know, to be honest with you, we identified more with the Strokes aesthetically than we did with Newfound Glory. You know, just look at a picture of Sugarcult. We don't look like a pop punk band. You know what I mean? and not that there's anything wrong with pop punk, but like it was an epiphany to us when we started playing the Warped Tour and all those bands started asking us to go on tour with them, and all their fans started buying our hoodies. We're like, holy shit, this is crazy. These kids actually like our band. This is fucking rad. And so we just kind of went with it, and we had a great time. But like I said, we were never like a pop punk or emo band by design. We weren't like four guys who answered an ad in the paper that said influences Blink-182 and Taking Back Sunday. Like, that was the last thing on our mind. We ended up becoming friends with all those bands, and they were all fucking awesome people. But it was an interesting thing. 90% of those bands didn't realize what they were doing either. There's a few of them like where they were like literally like, okay, we are going to start this type of a band. But I think Sum 41 was basically like, we love NoFX, we love the Beastie Boys. And then you get Sum 41. You know, the Used were literally, we toured with them. They were like, we literally love Refused so much that we named our band The Used because we had a sticker like this and we just chopped off the REF and used the Used part. I mean, like, most bands start out very, you know, heavily influenced by whoever they happen to like at the time. And then they end up running off in their own direction. Like you said, Pretty Girl the Way earlier. Listen to that song. It's essentially Nirvana mixed with Watching the Detectives by Elvis Costello. So you take a used Elvis Costello record, apply it to your Nirvana Nevermind CD, put it in a blender, and you're going to end up with our song Pretty Girl. Stuck in America, me and, Tim and I had this crush on this band from Australia called The Living End. We love The Living End. And just aesthetically, we identify with them. We're like, we seem to both like, you know, cool things about The Clash, but also want to sound modern. And I think Bouncing Off the Walls and Stuck in America were both probably written at the time we had a crush on The Living End. We were like listening to their songs. Let's see. I mean, you just listen to our music. It's just a reflection of the shit we thought was cool. But yeah, dude, it's a trip. Start Static. Like, I find that people are like coming up to me now and they're going, dude, it's weird. When I was a kid, I was all about Bouncing Off the Walls and like Daddy's Little Defect. But as I've grown up, now I like to listen to Lost in You and like, you know, We Come Crashing Down and maybe, you know, some of those songs like Saying Goodbye. It's weird how the album sort of like grows with you. Like I said, it's like wine. Like you're drinking it when you're a kid just to get the high. And then as you grow up, you start to like swirl it around your mouth and appreciate the nuances that maybe were completely lost on you because you weren't emotionally mature enough at the time. So that's why it's one of the fun things about rock and roll. It really is like, it's like this experience that you can enjoy raw in its moment, but you can also tuck it away for 10 years and then pull it up again. And suddenly it becomes like a time machine. It's going to bring you back, like release all these spirits that like, oh man, I remember who I was hanging out with that summer. I remember where we were living. I remember those days. And I mean, the music just evokes those cool emotions, and it's so fun. I mean, it's such a, like, I can't tell you enough, dude, what a incredible rewarding feeling it is to be able to know that our band, the music we made up, somehow has had that effect on other people's lives, people that we maybe, you know, won't ever meet in person or see eye to eye or face to face. And to know that there's all these people out there somewhere on this giant rock floating through space who somehow have our record to hold on to. And that's like something that's going to be the portal to a bunch of rad memories in their life, or be the backdrop, the background music to something, profound in their life. Or just be playing in the background, like while they're like fucking cleaning their house or like, getting their kids ready for school, whatever it might be. It's so cool. It's like, it's kind of like, I don't know. It kind of gives me the chills, like more than any of the money we ever made or like fucking autographs we signed or, selfish things that we got out of it, being able to buy houses and be able to, travel the world. More than that is to feel that like somewhere out there right now at this moment, there's probably someone somewhere in the world listening to music that we made up in this tiny little box, in Santa Barbara and with our friends, that's a fucking, again, we didn't think about that stuff at the time. All we cared about was like, trying to get some girls' attention, how many drink tickets we were getting and, trying to get our band booked for some opportunities for shows or whatever. That was pretty much as far as we could think. We weren't thinking like, oh, we're going to be creating records that are going to stand the test of time and become the soundtracks to people's lives. Like, that's fucking crazy. And it's like, but that's everything, man. That's what else can you do with your time on earth besides create something that's going to like resonate and like, I mean, not to sound morbid, but that our fucking songs are going to be around longer than any of us. And that's kind of cool. it's like, I mean, fuck, we still listen to music we still listen to the Beatles, we still listen to the Ramones are all fucking dead. We still listen to the Ramones, David Bowie. It's like David Bowie died. Prince died, but not really.
No.
As far as you and me are concerned, they're just as alive as they've ever been. Cause I don't know about you, but I never knew Dave or fucking Prince, personally. All I ever knew was their music. So in that respect, they're still alive as far as I know, and if that's not a case to like make records for other people, it, like out there who might want to start bands or be musicians, then I don't know what is. Cause I mean, that's a pretty cool fucking thing to do,
There was somebody, and I haven't told the story in a while, but it just reminded me with more so the I don't know Prince personally thing. So I forget who I had on, but they were talking about someone on their tour, in their tour crew, I guess, toured with Prince.
Oh my gosh.
And he goes, so one night, we
Hold
needed...
on 1 second. I just got to stop you for 1 second. I'm supposed to meet with somebody at 10:30, and I'm just going to tell them I'm going to be a couple minutes late.
Okay.
All right, cool.
By the way, how many test presses did you guys do of the 20th anniversary thing? Do you guys have that information?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how many test pressings.
Well, if you guys have an extra one, I'll buy it off you.
Oh, do you collect them? Okay, cool.
Yeah. I usually try to like get like free vinyl, and so far I've gotten one record, and it was a test press from doing this show over the 5 years of doing this. But no, I was gonna say, so my friend, like this dude was like, so we're on tour. This dude like toured with Prince, and he tells us a story about we stopped at a Walmart, and Prince is like, well, I need toothpaste. I'm gonna come out with you. And we're like, you sure? And he's like, yeah. So it's like 3:00. I think they said they're like, it's somewhere in the Midwest, I believe is where they said they were. So they pull in, and Prince is waiting in line, and with this other person, he goes to buy this toothpaste or whatever. And then he realizes like people start recognizing that it's Prince, but like he goes to pay for this toothpaste with $100 bill. Because it's Prince, and he doesn't have really probably a concept of money, or that like you don't need to. Yeah, exactly. And then he like, someone started recognizing him, or he noticed that people were starting to come, and then so he just left the $100 bill and left. So he basically paid like $100 for this toothpaste.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I was just like, just the absurdity of being like, there's Prince at like 3:00 in the morning at a Walmart in the middle of nowhere buying toothpaste. Like, what the fuck?
That's amazing. I love that kind of thing.
So that's the only proximity to Prince I have, is someone's like third-hand account of being on tour with him.
That's rad, man. Yeah, well, people like Prince really are something special. I mean, that's a whole other level. But I think what I mean, aside from the fact that he's obviously a fucking musical genius and an incredible songwriter, I think one of the things about Prince that makes us talk about Prince with a different tone is that he had that thing that I personally, I mean, here's my kids today moment. I personally think one of the things missing in music is that thing that Prince and David Bowie maybe brought to the world, is that mystique, you know, like rock and roll, like music culture, because I mean, this is a wonderful thing because it's become so accessible. Anyone can just get Pro Tools and learn how to use it, or GarageBand, or get good gear now. You can jump on your, phone and just like, Google any kind of cool clothes or shoes or gear or whatever and get it sent to you. So you don't have to go on that weird, like, and in a weird way, like I see like young people are like, you're cool at school if you have like green hair now. You're cool at school if you have, if you're into like, if you're a skateboarder or if, whereas, when I was growing up, that was like, the outcast, the outcasts became punk rockers and skaters and musicians. Yeah. And, you went there because girls ignored you. You went there because the popular kids made fun of you, and we were sort of like, it was kind of this like loser kingdom of like weirdos. And we all kind of made up this thing, but like people like Prince were fucking oddballs. They were weirdos. I can think of maybe someone today, like maybe Jack White has that sort of thing that I'm talking about, that undefinable something, that kind of mystique. But I feel like in a weird way, like somehow music culture has just become so acceptable and so cool that it's kind of lost a little bit of that like mystery and mystique. And I will say that in Sugarcult, we tried, to some degree, without being too pretentious, we did try to kind of hang on to a little bit of that. Like we celebrated a little bit of that sort of rock and roll romance of like, like you never saw a picture of Sugarcult wearing like baggy shorts and like a Hurley t-shirt. We kind of had our own vibe. We constructed our own little universe, and then we lived in it. We took that universe to the Warped Tour, and we took it to MTV, and we took it to the radio, and we took it on tour with Good Charlotte. We took it on tour with Green Day. We took it everywhere we went, but we never stopped being it. It wasn't like, oh, cool, we're on the Warped Tour and they're accepting us, so let's just all put on, Motion City soundtrack hoodies and jump around on stage and just like enjoy and then just like, we kept our own thing.
Right.
That's something that we did it mostly just because it was just who we were, and we were just kind of trying to stay true to our vision. But we also felt like there was a certain amount of, there was something like artists like Prince where you're like, I don't want to fit in. I want to do our own thing. And I mean, I want people to like our band, but I'm not going to like be something I'm not just so people will like our band. I'm happy that people love our band, but we're not, but I'm even happier that they love our band without our band having to pander to them or change who we are. And that's, to me, what makes the kinds of bands and that I end up staying a fan of are the ones where they lead, they don't follow,
Absolutely.
I mean, Head Automatica was not what Glassjaw fans wanted to hear.
No. That's actually how I got into Glassjaw, was getting into Head Automatica.
Right. And I personally liked Head Automatica better than Glassjaw, but some people were like, oh, they might like Glassjaw better than Head Automatica. I like when artists lead, and the classic example is The Clash. Like, they never got comfortable. They always kept pushing themselves. And those were sort of our spirit animals. They were sort of our forefathers, where we thought like, okay, we made Start Static. We don't need to make Start Static again. So we're going to make Palm Trees and Power Lines now. And now that we made Palm Trees and Power Lines, we don't need to make that again. So we're going to make Lights Out now. And now that we made that record, we don't ever need to make a record again. No, I'm just joking. But, if you listen to our 3 records, they're all Sugarcult. They all have Sugarcult as the common denominator, but but each one has its own personality, its own character. They're not just like, okay, that record works, so now let's just like copy paste it, change some lyrics around and change the key and then make another version of it. Each record has its own personality, and you can listen to them in any order. You can even put all our stuff in one playlist and put it on shuffle, and it'll probably somehow make sense because of Tim's voice or whatever. But if you listen to like literally, if you lined up Start Static, Palm Trees and Power Lines, and Lights Out and listen to them all the way through in order, it's not a mistake that it's going to feel like when you watch like all Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Like they're kind of a trilogy. One's called You're the One, starts out with a snare drum. And then the last song on Lights Out is called Hiatus. Okay? First record's called Start Static. Middle record's called Palm Trees and Power Lines. Third record's called Lights Out. So there is a story there that we were trying to tell without making it like it's not like conceptual, like a concept record or a theme record or like something like American Idiot. But there is something, each record has its own sort of vibe and tells a story and has this like, they have, like I said, they're very cinematic in that, you wouldn't just put I Changed My Name randomly on a record. It belongs where it is. And there's even songs on Start Static that there's songs we had at the time of Start Static that should have made the record. They were good enough songs to make the record. But we were so adamant about making sure the record had a continuity and a flow that we didn't know where to put it. So again, it was like, fuck, we got to leave that song off the record because there's just no logical spot to put it where it's not going to disrupt the flow of the record. Case in point, the song called Say I'm Sorry. So that song's like one of our demos that got us our record deal. The irony is it's one of the ones that the label loved and signed us on, and then we didn't even put it on our record. Well, that song now is finally going to be available because it's like the bonus track. It's one of the bonus tracks on the 20-year anniversary edition of Start Static. So you'll finally be able to hear it on like Spotify and Apple Music. And if you're lucky, you get a copy of the vinyl. You'll have Say I'm Sorry, which I'm sure you could find on YouTube anyway, because all our shit's just been like, But we have Say I'm Sorry. We have our cover of Elvis Costello's song No Action. That's a bonus track. And then we have a live version of Bouncing Off the Walls and a live version of Stuck in America. So there's a bunch of bonus tracks. And then we might put out a collection of our pre-Start Static demos that used to be called Wrap Me Up in Plastic. We might put that out finally, not because we think the songs are great, but because enough time has gone by where I feel like, again, like as a fan, it becomes culturally kind of interesting to see like, the band's baby steps when we were just sort of trying to find our footing and figure out what we wanted to go for. So it might be kind of interesting to listen to some of those songs. They kind of make us cringe a little bit because, again, it's like looking at your embarrassing picture of you when you were 13 and you had that like, you went through that weird phase where your teeth were all jacked up and your hair looked kind of crazy. But I think that some of those songs, again, our band doesn't just belong to us. It belongs to our fans too. And I feel like why deprive people of that music? And it also bums me out when I see that shit going on like, eBay for like fucking $400 for a CD. I'm like, dude, no, we'll put it out. Have it for free. Anyway, man, I think I better jump because I got this other thing. But
absolutely,
dude, I hope you got something you were looking for, and thank you so much for your support.
No, I mean, just the conversation is really like what I enjoy. Sort of like you were saying, like why we collect all the stuff and it being a snapshot. I started doing this because too many times I'd go hang out with friends and stuff, and everyone's just like. And you're like, well, what the fuck, man? Like, it's like I was actually telling my wife the other day, I go, because I've been using Facebook and social media a lot less because I go, the problem is then I go to hang out with someone and they start telling me a story. I'm like, yeah, I already saw that on Facebook.
I know.
So it's like I haven't seen this person for 4 months, but I already know everything that's happened to them. So then it's like when you're trying to hang out and have that actual one-on-one connection again of going back to, being hunter-gatherers and, telling stories around campfires and just learning and talking to people and that human connection, we've lost it. So that's kind of why I started doing this was just to talk to people that I grew up listening to or admiring or whatever. And then really in the last like 6 months to a year, I stopped doing the thing where I would come up with a line of questions and try to keep it focused to the record or whatever and just be like, fuck it. I'm just going to have a conversation with someone because that's more what the whole point of a podcast is. It's just a free form conversation. So
I love that. And it's interesting because one of the things I do now is I actually teach a few college courses. I teach music business And I used to be like super fucking freaked out and like make a whole thing and like plan everything and then go in there. And then I realized I was like, I feel like we're losing that. People can Google that shit. I want to go in there and just kind of like throw myself in the moment and with a basic chord changes, but then just see what happens when you sort of improvise and just let it happen, let the conversation unfold, let other people chime in and just kind of direct the experience. And ends up being so much more valuable than if you just go in there and like fucking scroll through a PowerPoint presentation. And you know what I mean? It's just so much. I feel like the randomness, and I mean, again, that was a big thing with Sugarcult. You couldn't get 4 more different people. Me and Tim, we hit it off a lot, but like a lot of the shit I love, he fucking hated. A lot of the shit he loved, I fucking hated. Somewhere in between became what we landed on as Sugarcult, but we edited each other. If it would have been like, Marco, you drive, we might have driven off a fucking cliff of just like, sounding like the fucking, some obscure fucking weird, like the New York Dolls or something like that. If we would have let Tim drive, we might have ended up sounding like fucking, I don't know, Everclear or some shit like that. If we would have let Aaron drive, we would have fucking sounded like, the Red Hot Chili Peppers having a fucking orgy with the guys in Radiohead, And if we would have let our drummer Ben drive, we probably would have ended up sounding like Carrie Underwood. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like we were such fucking random people. So that was part of what made it interesting, in my opinion. My opinion is what makes Sugarcult sound a little bit magic is that it was this alchemy of weird, of like people we were all in service of good songwriting and being a good band, but no one was a virtuoso. And, there was so much imagination involved in what we were doing because we didn't have this like blueprint. It wasn't like, okay, here's what we do. We get a Mason Boogie dual rectifier. We wear Hurley clothes. We do unison rock jumps, and we sing about, stuff that 14-year-old boys talk about at sleepovers. That wasn't our fucking model, and so I feel like we stumbled, even though we're a very traditional rock and roll band with a guitar, bass, drums, harmony, vocals. We stumbled on something that we stumbled on having our own place at the table.
Yeah.
With all those other bands, and all those other bands are very unique too. Even there's huge nuances between bands that follow the same recipe. But like, I feel like if you go back and listen to Sugarcult as someone in their 30s, you're going to go, especially if you also listen to us back when you were in your teens, you're going to go, oh shit, I didn't realize it at the time, but now that I fucking give it a closer look, like you said, it was a premature sort of assessment to just assume this was just another band jumping around at the Warped Tour. Like, there's something about Sugarcult that I feel like was a little deeper. And I'll say the same thing about Motion City Soundtrack, Jimmy Eat World, lots of these bands where you go back and listen to it, you go, oh shit. Motion City Soundtrack got sort of thrown in as like, oh yeah, another emo band from the thing. And it's like, no, they weren't. Those guys were into like Archers of Loaf and Jawbox and all this cool fucking, underground music from the 90s. And they just happened to like manifest it at the time of the Warped Tour and Fuse and 8 Alternative Press. And they got sort of lumped in with this, with like, oh, Motion City Soundtrack, Fall Out Boy. It's like, no, listen to that band. They're very fucking unique. That singer, Justin, is a fucking weirdo. Like, he's just awesome. Anyway, so much good shit. I could talk about this shit forever, and the coffee is strong. John, dude, shoot me I know you're never on social media anymore, but shoot me a DM on Instagram or something so we can get in touch.
Yeah.
And we'll do it.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back on for another part 2 at some point whenever you got time.
Anytime,
this is fun.
Dude. Anytime, man.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right, late.
All right, so that was my conversation with Marko DeSantis of Sugarcult. Again, 20 years of Start Static. It is hard to believe that some of my favorite records from growing up are turning 20. It makes me feel fucking old. I'm sure being in the bands, it makes you feel equally as old. But it is one of those things where sometimes these classic records just age very well. And it's one of those where you throw it on, and sometimes it gives you a sense of nostalgia of where you were, things you were doing at the time. And maybe in other situations, it's just a reminder that you didn't outgrow a band or didn't outgrow music, that maybe it was always of a certain level and always kept growing with you, and you kept noticing different things about it as you got older that you didn't know about it at the time. I think that's kind of one of the interesting things about, well, actually, I guess a lot of things, but I guess it's just mainly perspective. You know, when you're a young 20-something, you might hear a song like bouncing off the wall, and it makes you, it's fun because it's energetic, and you jump up and down, and reminds you of going to see the Van Wilder movie with your friends. But then it turns into this thing where as you get older, maybe it's like, I can relate more to the lyrical themes and kind of that idea of like, oh, this is how I feel, and being in a different perspective, which is something I talk a lot about on this show. And, you know, it was really cool kind of talking with Marko about, you know, the legacy of Sugarcult. You know, I know we didn't necessarily just hammer and focus on 20 years of Start Static, but we kind of talked about it through the lens of just, you know, fans of music getting older and curating things, whether it be playlists or actually like your record collection or things, or in Marko's case, maybe tour stories or stories about making these albums and so forth. And it really does kind of become this weird snapshot of a time, but also the time that's informing what you're going to be doing moving forward, you know, as far as being a musician, where we're always about a year or two behind everybody as far as the output of what they're doing. So it was a lot of fun getting to talk to Marko. I could talk to that dude for hours. So I would love to have him back on another time and just shoot the shit for a little bit. That was kind of the fun thing with this sometimes, when there's not necessarily really a thing to plug, but like we can just kind of go wherever the conversation's going. So big thanks to Marko. If you'd like to keep up with Marko, well, I'll make it real easy. He has Instagram, and it is at his name, Marko DeSantis, on Instagram, all one word. If you'd like to keep up with Sugarcult, they're on Facebook at Sugarcult Rock and Roll. They do not have an Instagram, and Twitter is just at Sugarcult, or you can go to sugarcult.com. I believe, I'm going to click on my own link. I believe pre-orders are still available for the Start Static Deluxe Edition, the 20th anniversary. Let me double check. Check. Ooh, they have a clear and the black. Everything else has sold out. Almost all the other bundles have sold out. They do still have some hoodies. I actually might pick up a hoodie here pretty soon. I might do that and surprise my wife with that. But don't tell her. So it's one of those, if you would like to go to that, just go to sugarcult.com, pick up some Start Static merch, bundles, vinyl, whatever you are able to pick up. And we're going to wrap this up. If you would like to keep up with us, it's simple enough. You can find us at brewspeakpod.com. That is the landing page for anything you need to know about our show, all of our socials, all of our friends' shows that we like to promote. And speaking of promoting, I want to plug our awesome podcast sponsors. Starting with Rockabilia, head on over to rockabilia.com, where they have over 500,000 items in their online store. Use our code BREWtally and take 10% off your total purchase order. On Point Pomade for keeping our beard and hairs looking on point. Use our code BSP15 and take 15% off your total purchase order. And last but not least is the Bean Bastard. Head on over to thebeanbastard.com, pick up some delicious coffee, and I'm fucking excited. My wife surprised me with tickets to the Every Time I Die Christmas show, and our Airbnb is about 5 minutes away from the actual Bean Bastard store. So I'm going to go there one day and get some breakfast and get some coffee, and very much looking forward to it. It's been a long time coming to actually go to the brick and mortar store. I remember when this whole thing was just an idea Maruso had started. So to actually see it come to fruition to a full-on store that has employees and is all of this is really inspiring. So I'm very much looking forward to going down there to Buffalo and checking out his store. And before we get out of here, I want to plug the Patreon one more time. We are putting up a lot of the episodes, actually all the episodes, before they ever air. They are all up on our Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/BrewspeakPod. For as little as $3, you'll get to hear all the audio before it comes out. And at the $5 tier, you'll get to see all the videos where they are applicable. There's also the weekly playlist that I break down, as well as some other bonus content up there that is exclusive to the Patreon. We are trying to build that. I want to thank our patrons. I want to thank Sarah Schneider. I want to thank Craig Kent, Malcolm Webster, and Mark Tagg, which I got to say, when Mark Tagg joined up, I knew who he was. because he is a supporter of the Josta Patreon, and hearing his name on every episode, he became sort of a little bit of a local celebrity to me, where I was like, holy shit, Mark Tag is, following and subscribing on our Patreon. That's really fucking cool. So if you would like your name shouted out at the end of the episode, go over to our Patreon. We shout out everyone that follows us over there. Thank you so much for your donations, and we will see you next week, where the guest is Cody Quitstad of Wage War. We'll talk to you then.
Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Coach, what'd you think?
Fucking embarrassing!
Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but I think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about new?
Okay, I thought we were going to get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks. But you knew what you were getting into. It will result in less listens. You're going to see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're going to see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you. Don't use this fucking riff. It sucks.